Turkey excludes Israel from a planned NATO military exercise, allegedly in protest against the war on Gaza. Are the strategic ties that exist between these nations simply over? Is it politically correct to link strategic military relations to the Middle East peace process? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the programme. I'm Sahil Rahman. Turkey making new friends and foes and redefining its position in the region. In recent times, Ankara's relations with Israel have deteriorated significantly. Turkey called off a military drill involving the two countries, the US and Italy. The 11-day exercise was supposed to start on Monday. Just days earlier, Ankara told the Israeli military it was no longer invited. The US and Italy subsequently opted not to take part either, leaving Turkey alone in the operation. At the same time, relations between Turkey and Syria are set to improve as a high-level delegation met on Tuesday. Travel restrictions between the two countries have now been scrapped. Now, these improving relations with Syria could signal further disruption to the Turkish-Israeli relationship. Turkey historically had somewhat warm relations with Israel. The two nations agreed to military and intelligence cooperation in 1996. Since then, Israel has been a major arms supplier to Turkey and has helped to modernise its air force. But after the Islamist-leaning AKP party was elected in 2002, relations began to sour. They really took a turn for the worst when Hamas leader Khalid Mashal visited Turkey in 2006. The following year, a thaw could have been predicted when Israeli President Shimon Peres made a three-day visit to Ankara, to be followed by Ehud Olmert in 2008. However, in January this year, Turkish Prime Minister Tayyip Erdogan publicly criticised Israel's assault on Gaza. He walked out on a speech by Peres at the World Economic Forum in Switzerland. Things may have been complicated further as Turkey welcomed controversial Iranian President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad for a short visit in August. Well, Turkey's certainly at the centre of everything. And my guest on our programme today in Istanbul, Mustafa Akyol. He's deputy editor of the Turkish Daily News. In Tel Aviv, Oded Eran, he's director of the Institute for National Security Studies and a former Israeli ambassador to the European Union. And in Washington, D.C., Steve Clemens, he's a senior fellow at the New America Foundation. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us on Inside Story. Can I come to you first, Mr. Akyol? I mean, why do you think those military manoeuvres were cancelled?
Well, the government or the Ministry of Foreign Affairs announced that this was just a postponement and due to technical difficulties. But word has it, and the media writes that it was basically postponed and Israel's presence in the joint operation was cancelled because Turkish authorities did not, quote, want to see the planes which bombed Gaza on Turkish skies. It was apparently a sentiment or a policy by the Turkish government to distance themselves from some of Israel's policies, which included the bombing of Gaza.
Of course. Mr. Oded
recently, which led to us.
No, indeed. Mr. Oded Eran in Tel Aviv, would you agree with that sort of summary of why you think Israel were withdrawn from this particular military manoeuvre?
I think that the background is a bit deeper in the sense that Turkey was involved in several efforts to progress, though, to push forward the peace process between Israel and its neighbors, mostly the Palestinians and Syria. Now, ever since the demise of the former Prime Minister of Israel, Mr. Olmert, the peace efforts with Syria have been frozen, and Turkey probably feels that it is out of that loop, and if anything is resumed, it will probably go to Washington to lead these negotiations.
But Turkey hasn't exactly stopped talking to Israel because talks on Syria have stalled. The main focus, you could say, for Turkey has been Israel's position with the Palestinians in Gaza and the particular episode of the war on Gaza in early 2009. That really has been, you might say, the straw that broke the camel's back.
I'm coming to it. And the second reason, as you rightly point out, is the Palestinian issue. The Turks were trying to go between Israel and the Hamas, more particularly on the issue of the hostage Gilad Shalit. And Israel, for reasons that we don't have time to discuss, had preferred Egypt to go between itself and the Hamas, and the Turks felt a bit rebuffed. There was another reason, and that is that Prime Minister Olmert visited Turkey and had talks with the Turkish leadership just a few days before the Cast-led operation in Gaza. And I think that the Turkish leadership might have felt that it was not very well informed, put it mildly, about the coming operation. I can understand the Prime Minister of Israel why he couldn't reveal, but I think that there could be a way to circumvent this particular issue. So I think that the Turkish leadership has at least a couple of reasons to be miffed by the Israeli behavior, and hopefully this will be a passing incident.
Well, will it be a passing incident? Steve Clemens, can I bring you in from DC? And what Mr. Aram was alluding to was this assurance, apparently, from Prime Minister Olmert just days before the war on Gaza that apparently he wasn't going to do anything, according to the Turkish Prime Minister. In the long run, does postponing these military operations, I mean, what sort of knockback will it have for Turkey, if any at all?
I think that what we're seeing is not something that will fade as just a small event. I think Turkey is sending signals that the price for its strategic cooperation, both with the West and with other countries, is going up dramatically. I think, like the ambassador said, Turkey's offended and disturbed by the change of course after Prime Minister Olmert's tenure as Prime Minister of Israel. And Turkey's saying, both within NATO, which is quite stressed, and the relations within NATO are stressed because of Afghanistan, the West needs Turkey more broadly in the Middle East, and Turkey was playing a rather remarkable and important role trying to sort of negotiate Israeli peace with the Syrians, that all of this was put on hold. And I think, like President Obama, Prime Minister Olmert, other Middle East leaders, and Prime Minister Erdogan in Turkey, are saying that the status quo between Israel being unreconciled with its neighbors is just completely impossible, and it's put a higher price tag on its cooperation until it begins to see movement, and adding, I think, to its stock value as a portal, if you will, into sort of a new equilibrium in the Middle East.
Mustafa Akil, can I bring you in here then? But hasn't that equilibrium changed over the years since the AK or the AK party came to power in 2002? It seems that the relationship between Israel and Turkey has been pretty steady in the 70s and 80s, cold here and there, but generally since 2002 it has gone downhill because of the, as some would say, the more Islamist AK party coming to power and a change in government more recently, of course, in Israel.
Well, since 2002, Turkey has two orientations which are not incompatible. One is trying to be more active in the Middle East, and especially trying to help building peace in the Middle East, and as seen in the case with Syria and Israel, or with the with the Israelis and the Palestinians. So Turkey wants to be a bridge, a negotiator, a peacemaker. But at the same time, Turkey's own public sentiments get more and more echoed in Turkish foreign policy, because actually in the past 10 years, Turkey has been democratized more than it ever was. So the government, the current government, probably presents the general will of the Turkish society more than the generals used to do, like a decade ago.
Well, just give us a sense then on the Turkish street. Give us a sense on the Turkish street. What do people make of this particular scenario that's facing Turkey and Israel?
Well, the general sentiment in Turkey would be more in favor of Palestine than I would say in Israel. This doesn't mean that Turks are against Israel, no, but the plight of the Palestinians have deep correspondence in Turkish society. And this is not just the Islamic camp in Turkish society. Turkish left has been, for decades, strongly pro-Palestinian. And when Turks look at the Middle East, they want generally overwhelmingly a bi-state solution, but they generally see, in the last years exactly, especially, Israel as an obstacle to the formation of a two-state solution. And they are very critical of Israel, and especially when Israel bombs Gaza or southern Lebanon, as a counterinsurgency policy, but which also harms the Palestinians there, kills hundreds of innocent civilians. Turks feel very strongly against that. And I think the AKP government reflects that sentiment in its foreign policy, but it doesn't do it in a way which is anti-Israel, as some people have called, but it is doing it by being critical, very critical of Israel on some issues, but also going to keep the relations with Israel and still hoping to be a negotiator between Israel and its neighbors.
Oded Aaron in Tel Aviv, hearing what Mustafa has just said in Istanbul, it's perhaps understandable to perhaps conclude that many Muslim countries would not want to have dealings with Israel for the moment until the Palestinian issue is sorted. But one of the problems that perhaps that Turkey has to concern itself about is it has to have good ties perhaps with Israel, to have good ties with the EU and with the USA as well, because that's also quite interlinked and direct, isn't it?
I fully agree with you. I think that the Turkish, if I can interpret the Turkish strategic outlook, all of these issues are interlinked between them. And I think that maybe in Ankara they feel that at this particular moment there is no price to being critical of Israel, neither in Brussels nor in Washington. And maybe they feel that they can be more vocal in the criticism of Israel. But I think that in the long run, Turkey being a real power in this region will have to come to some sort of a balance between its relations with the Arab Muslim world, certainly in this region, and Israel. After all, whether we like it or not, Israel is 50% of the Israeli-Arab conflict. And therefore, if Turkey wants to play a role in stabilizing the region, it will have to resume a dialogue with Israel on all the strategic issues.
Just hold that thought there. Let's just bring our viewers up to speed with some of the comments that have been coming out of Israel. We've certainly heard what we think the Turkish public think through Mustafa, but Turkey insists the cancellation of those joint military exercises was not political. However, in an interview with CNN, Turkey's foreign minister has said, "We hope that the situation in Gaza will be improved, the situation will be back to the diplomatic track, and that we will create a new atmosphere in the Turkish-Israeli relations as well." Meanwhile, Israeli Defence Minister has been playing down the tensions. He said, in spite of the ups and downs, Turkey remains a central figure in our region. There is no place for getting drawn into fiery statements against them. That was Ehud Barak, the Defence Minister for Israel. Steve Clemens, can I just bring you in here? Israel and Turkey are talking about a strategic alliance that they've had for many decades now, and one might put that into context during the era of the Cold War, the US versus the Soviet Union. Both Israel and Turkey were allies of the US. So what's the strategic reason to have such a partnership now?
Well, I think that both of these powers, which, as the ambassador said, are real powers, substantial powers, Turkey with a sizable population and a military professionalism in their country, was a secular nation with a very, very large Muslim population sitting astride both the broader Middle East and on the edge of Europe, some would say in Europe. That Turkey is an obviously important strategic player, and Israel is the reigning, regional superpower in terms of its own military capacity. And the two, particularly with the secular course of Turkey, have been allied for a very long period of time. When I was last in Israel, I heard a great deal about the long-standing relationship with Turkey. I met the Turkish ambassador. I later met the Turkish foreign minister and his deputy, who I think is the new foreign minister, who were deeply involved in Israel-Syria talks. And the Gaza incursion and the change of government from Prime Minister Olmert to Prime Minister Netanyahu has had a devastating impact on that relationship. And I think there are strategic realities that will continue to endure about why these two countries will want to know each other. But I think that what Turkey's sending is a signal that they're not going to play a passive role anymore. They are going to say, we all have a responsibility to move the Israeli-Palestinian relationship and Israel's relationship with the broader region in a new and more constructive direction. And we're not going to sit by and be passive in that and appease the worst behaviors that they feel that they saw in the Gaza crisis. And I think there are a lot of folks in the world who generally agree with that.
Well, Mustafa Akolov, and bring you in again. I mean, doesn't that then mean that Turkey's position as a neutral mediator then shifts slightly to a more Islamist, more Arab-leaning, and therefore Turkey's aspirations of becoming an international mediator alongside perhaps the likes of Egypt within the Arab world really doesn't happen at all?
Well, I mean, we should understand the transformation that Turkish society and Turkish state is passing through. For decades, Turkey was under the impact of a revolution which started in the 1920s, which totally distanced itself from the Middle East. Turkey wanted to be Western and nothing else. And successive Turkish governments said, generally, we don't have anything to do with the Middle East. We are not interested in the affairs of the Middle East. Israel was an ally mainly against the communist threat, the Soviet threat in the Cold War. But when this ended, well, that was gone. And the second thing, this ideological bent against Arabs is now mostly gone in Turkish politics, because Turkey is more democratic, and this way of looking towards its neighbors with contempt is very much abandoned by the current government. The current government started its zero problem policy towards the neighbors, and that has succeeded well with Iraq, Iraqi Kurds, with Syria, recently with Armenia. And Turkey is getting back to its roots, which connects itself culturally to the Middle East, and that includes the Arab peoples and, of course, the Jewish people as well. But the ideological bent, ideological pro-Israeli bent in Turkish politics, which peaked in the late 90s when Turkey was very much under the rule of the generals, that is gone right now. And the current government, I don't define it as an Islamist government, but it certainly has Islamic values in its making. And it is, yes, culturally close to its neighbors in the Arab world. But at the same time, Turkey keeps its Western orientation. At the same time, it keeps its ambition to join the EU. Sure. And at the same time, it wants to keep on being an ally of Israel, but at the same time, be critical of Israel when Israel does things which look from a Turkish perspective unacceptable. Sure. In terms of human rights.
Mr. Aaron, can Turkey have its cake and eat it? Can it be critical of Israel and still be an ally, still be a mediator, still be involved in the peace process, whether it's with the Palestinians or eventually with the Syrians, if that ever happens, or wider afield in the Arab world?
I think that Turkey can fulfill this role, but I would, if I may, advise leaders in Turkey to refrain from populist statements which send the wrong message to Israel.
But those
don't
populist,
forget that
sorry, Mr. Aaron, those populist messages are only made on the back of, some observers would say, Israeli actions against groups of Muslim people, and that's where the antagonism lies. That's the root cause, surely.
Yeah, but I mean, there is criticism and there is criticism, and the choice of words is very important, especially in a sensitive region like the Middle East. And I think that we will continue, Israel will continue to look at Turkey as a very important strategic ally. We face, even in modern times, although the strategic partnership goes to the middle 50s, but we face common threats. We face the wish to build a stable Middle East. Turkey is a very important element, not only politically or culturally, but also in terms of the economics of the region. Just two examples, energy and water. It can be a bridge between the Middle East, including Israel, and Europe. And so it should be. I also advocate membership of Turkey in the EU, although it's not for Israel to decide this question.
Sorry, I'm just going to bring in Mr. Clemens there. You were nodding with some of the things that Mr. Aaron was saying, and perhaps even with a couple of my comments before that. But just to bring you in here, we have to talk about the intelligence sharing protocols. They haven't been cancelled, regardless of this argument at the moment. The free trade agreement signed in 2000 hasn't been got rid of, and nor has the military cooperation agreements of 1996. So the fundamental foundations are still there to possibly rebuild on.
And I think they will be for a long time, but they're not automatic. I think Turkey and Israel will be less dependable to each other as allies unless the mutual behaviors of both can begin to come back together. And I think the optics of the relationship are going to be messy for some time. And so when you see Erdogan storm out of a meeting at the World Economic Forum with David Ignatius and Shimon Peres, that was showing an optical concern at the surface of the relationship. And it's a market signal that you hope that this doesn't go deeper, but it would be a mistake, I think, a very large mistake, to think that if Israel continued to sort of move along a pugnacious nationalist line, we can talk about populist rhetoric. I watch very carefully the statements of Avigdor Lieberman, the current foreign minister of Israel, and he provides a lot of material out there for, you know, conspiracy-oriented media and others in the Middle East. And so the call for, you know, responsible stewardship of this relationship and their responsibilities in the region needs to be applied on all sides. And I think that Turkey is saying we're not going to accept the status quo position any longer. We rolled up our sleeves, we threw up our effort into trying to bring Israel into broader constructive contact with its neighbors. Prime Minister Olmert was on the verge of that. It was unfortunate to see that effort go at the end of his term. But clearly Israel's in a different place today. And I think that this cancellation of this military exercise is a surfacey thing. But it could go deeper if we don't begin to see a different kind of step forward from the Israeli government.
OK, we have very little time. I want to bring in this whole Syria issue today. Syria and Turkey getting rid of really their border restrictions and allowing free movement between the two. Mr. Akyol in Istanbul, I mean, how much emphasis is there, do you think, on Turkey to get back to the negotiating table as a mediator and try and help Syria and Israel to some sort of peace agreement?
Well, Turkey is still very much willing to do that. Turkey definitely has now great relations with Syria. 10 years ago, Turkey was on the brink of going to war with Syria because Syria was at least perceived to be supporting the PKK, the terrorist movement in Turkey, the separatist terrorist movement. Now, great relations. Turkey is hoping to start the negotiating role it had between Syria and Israel, which was cut short by Israel's attack on Gaza earlier this year. Turkey is also even hoping to find a middle way and negotiate between Iran and the U.S. And I know that in their private conversations, Turkish leaders are trying to tell the Iranians in order to stop their nuclear program, or at least build their nuclear energy, but not weapons, and be in more closer cooperation with the West and the international community.
We know that the Turkish Prime Minister is going to Iran shortly. Mr. Eren, can I just bring you in here? We've got very little time. I just wanted to ask you about what you regard as, is there an appetite within the Israeli administration to certainly try and restart negotiations with Syria over the Golan Heights? Do you think that, or will some time have to pass, perhaps?
I think that the Israeli government will have to choose between the two major tracks. I don't believe that we can do it simultaneously. We can certainly probe the possibility of resumption of talks with Syria, and in this case, Turkey will be a very important factor. I also agree with the point on Iran. One of the problems in dealing with Tehran is the ability to talk to the top leadership in Tehran. For the time being, we are talking, or not we, but the West is talking to the level below the top leadership.
Well, we shall see what happens over the coming weeks. I don't think this is going to go away too quickly. To all of my guests, Mustafa Akyol in Istanbul, Oded Iran in Tel Aviv, and Steve Clemens in Washington, D.C. Gentlemen, thank you very much for your time. And thank you for joining us on this edition of Inside Story. I'm Sahil Rahman. Thanks for your time and your company.